Hello, folks. We are back live from the Oasis. This is Mike Davis. So happy to be here with you again. I've missed being on here and teaching on this topic of who's the boss, women and men in biblical and cultural context. So the last time I was with you, what we have been examining is Mike Winger's teaching on the Greek term kephale. And by the way, often in the past I've said kephale. It's kephale. I've been really practicing to make sure I say it correctly, but kephale, which is translated in our English Bible as the word head, as in Ephesians chapter 5, when Jesus says that the husband is the head of the wife. The Greek term there is kephale. All right. We've been talking about Mike Winger's views where this is concerned, in part in his video series, Women in Ministry, video number 8, Male Headship, Is It Really Biblical? We've been talking about that, and I've been answering, or I should say, pushing back on some of the claims that he has made because of this. Proverbs chapter 18 and verse 17, and I'm going to read this again. We've been reading it before. Proverbs 18:17 says, "The first one to plead his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him." And Mike, the reason I've been dealing with this in such depth and in detail is because Mike hasn't just simply said, "Hey, here's the complementarian view and here's the egalitarian view, and I disagree with the egalitarians." That would be one thing. But what Mike has done is actually accused egalitarian scholars like Dr. Cynthia Westfall, uh, Dr. Lynn Cohick, Dr. Sandra Richter. He's accused, and Dr. Philip Payne. He's accused such scholars of not handling the Word of God faithfully. He's used words like trickery. He's used words like distorting the scriptures, which I consider to be defaming and slanderous. And so I thought somebody needs to speak to this because what he's doing is engaging in what a logical fallacy known as poisoning the well. Now, what's poisoning the well? Poisoning the well is when you say something negative against another person and or against their argument so that the people listening to that person or listening to you as you say something negative about that person or that argument, you just say a bunch of negative things. When they have the opportunity to listen to that person, read their book, they won't do it because they go, "Oh, yeah, that person is no good." Because I heard so and so say that they handle the word of God deceitfully. I heard Mike say that she's using statistical trickery. These are things that he said. I've heard Mike say that they're distorting the word of God. So I'm not going to listen to them. And so what ends up happening is he has people only listen to his point of view and not the other point of view because he has poisoned the well. So what I'm doing is saying, "Hey, look, that's not good." What I'm asking people to do is go back and check out what Mike said. You don't even got to believe me. Go check it out for yourself. But we have been dealing with what he has said, and we've been showing the videos and then going to the actual materials. And here's another reason why I'm doing this, because there are times I think to myself, am I spending too much time on this? I have been getting emails, well, not so much emails. I've been getting texts, and I've been have people respond to our YouTube channel who have said things like this. The majority of them have come from women saying things like this. "Thank you so much, number one, for being a guy, being a man, and teaching on this. Number two, thank you for helping to bring clarity, helping me to understand some things." And this is what really gets me. I've had several women say to me, "I felt called to the ministry, but I was told that as a woman, I couldn't do that." And a lady, a dear sister, just wrote me this past week saying that, and it's on my YouTube channel, that she said that she felt called to the ministry, but because of teachings like Mike Winger's complementarian teachings, she did not go into ministry. She became an English teacher instead. Now, she says she might come back around now. She might revisit the idea of going into ministry. But here's someone who was called, and because they wanted to be faithful to scripture, and they were being told, if you go into ministry and you try to operate as a pastor and an elder, you are out of God's will. They shut down their ministry. They shut down their call, I should say. They shut down their call. And then there are those, and there are some of you out there who may be dealing with this. You know your call, you're operating in your call. And I know because I've had some friends that told me, "Thank you for doing this," because they were operating in their call, but they were like, "What do I do with these scriptures that says, 'I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to have authority over men? Or what do I do when it says that women are supposed to be quiet? Or what do I do when it says that a woman should have a covering over her head? I don't have a covering. And they were struggling with these passages. And because we've been dealing with these passages, and some of them we still need to deal with, they said, Mike, thank you, because you brought such clarity, and I'm no longer struggling. I'm more confident now. One of the members of our fellowship, Claudia Lynham, she's one of the leaders in our fellowship. She's called into ministry. She's been a pastor, and she shared that with me. She says, "Yeah, because I struggle with these things, and you brought clarity, and now I'm much more confident moving in my call." So this is why I'm doing this. For those of you that may struggle, you don't know how to deal with certain passages, I want to provide you with a library of videos and information that you can go to. I'm trying to cover every single um, point that's made to say that this is why women can't do this. This is why women need to submit to men. This is why women can't operate in authority. I'm trying to cover all of this so that if you come up and you go like, well, what do I do? Because I've literally have people say to me, man, how do I deal with this? And I've had a few scholars even to say, go watch Mike Davis's video. And I was like, wow. And they watch and they go, oh man, this made it so, so clear. So we're doing this for you. When I mean we, it's me, my wife, and the support of our fellowship, the Oasis. So let's jump into this because I want to talk about something else again that Mike Winger has talked about. We're going to look more deeply at his video number 8, and my wife's head, where he talks about and he critiques the work of two egalitarian scholars, Dr. Lynn Cohick and Dr. Richard Cervin. So I want to show you one of the clips to kind of refresh where we were before. And let me bring this up. I want to make sure that we are there. And make sure I got the right one. Yeah, I believe yep, that's it. Oops. Nope. Don't want to do that. Let's see. Can I do it this way? Yes. There we go. All right. So I'm going to bring up this video of Mike Winger. This is a short clip where he is talking about Dr. Lynn Cohick. This is something that we've actually covered in detail. This is video that I'm doing number 2, message number 92, I should say. 90, yeah, we've done 92 messages. I'm trying to come up with something special for our 100th video because we still got a lot of ways to go. But in message 91, video 91, I dealt with Mike's critique of Dr. Lynn Cohick. So we're going to go back, look at a little bit of what he said, cover it a little bit more, and then then we'll go on from there. So let me play what he says here.
We're just playing with words if we argue about that. Let's go to the next one. This is going to be the, well, I guess I can't put it on the screen. For some reason, it's not popping up. But the Word Study Dictionary of the New Testament.
Oh, wait a minute.
And this is published in 1993.
This is not and where's my video? That says clip 2. Clip 3. I'm supposed to be clip number 1. I think I know what I did. I accidentally got rid of it. Okay, so let me see if I can find it for you. It's just something he said about Dr. Cohick, and I just wanted to play that. Let's see if I can find it. Hang on.
In Hebrew, Latin, and English, head can be used metaphorically to indicate leader. It is difficult to make...
Okay, hang on.
You can punch your own ceiling. I don't have to keep punching mine. All right, we're going to move on. But the bottom line for church history is that church history is pretty much always agreed. All right, let's go to the lexical claims. This is the last one.
Okay, this is it.
This is going to take a while. The lexical claims are particular. This is the biggest part of the debate, the lexical claims. Let me read to you a quote from Lynn Cohick on this. Okay, we're going to talk about her work here in particular. She says, and I quote, "The Greek term used for head is kephale, which typically refers to the physical head resting on the neck." And I showed some of this quote earlier, but we'll read more of it. In Hebrew, Latin, and English, head can be used metaphorically to indicate leader. It is difficult to make the case that it refers to leader in Greek, for we have almost no evidence of this. Then she says this, and this is the thing we're going to test. Lexicons in the 19th and 20th centuries suggested source as a possible meaning, metaphorical meaning, but not leader. I have no evidence that head means leader in Greek, and lexicons in the 19th and 20th century support source, but not leader. So I have access to a bunch of lexicons.
Okay, so I want to play this one more time because I want you to notice what he reads about Dr. Kohik and then how he quotes, he summarizes what she says, and basically what he does is he changes what she says. I want you to listen to the quote first, and then what she actually says. He quotes her accurately, then he restates what she says. Let me play it back for you again.
Greek, for we have almost
Good. Let me
no
go back a little bit
evidence of
further.
this. All right, let's go to the lexical claims. This is
So
the
again,
last
listen to what he actually reads, and then listen to how he restates what she says.
one. This is going to take a while. The lexical claims are particular. Um, this is the biggest part of the debate, the lexical claims. Let me read to you a quote from Lynn Kohik on this. Okay, we're going to talk about her work here in particular. She says, and I quote, the Greek term used for head is kephale, which typically refers to the physical head resting on the neck. And I showed some of this quote earlier, but we'll read more of it. In Hebrew, Latin, and English, head can be used metaphorically to indicate leader. It is difficult to make the case that it refers to leader in Greek, for we have almost no evidence of this. Then she says this, and this is the thing we're going to test. Lexicons in the 19th and 20th centuries suggested source as a possible meaning, metaphorical meaning, but not leader.
Or two, I could have played that one. So what, I'm gonna take this down for a second. So what Mike says is he quotes her and then he misquotes her. He restates what she says and then he misquotes her. Dr. Kohik said in Hebrew, Latin, and English, and this is from this book here. It's from the book Discovering Biblical Equality, pages 199 and 200. In Hebrew, Latin, and English, head can be used metaphorically to indicate leader. Hebrew, Latin, and English. Then she says it is difficult to make the case that it refers to leader in Greek, which is the language of the New Testament, for we have almost no evidence of this. Now, notice that she says Hebrew, Latin, and English, it can be used metaphorically, but it is difficult to make the case that it refers to leader in Greek because we almost have no evidence of it. Mike quotes her, he quotes this, and then he restates it as her saying this: I have no evidence that head means leader in Greek. That's not what she says. She did not say, I have no evidence of this in Greek. She said, it is difficult to make the case that it refers to leader in Greek, for we have almost no evidence of this. So he restates it to make her say something she didn't say. Okay. And he does it because he's going to make a point. Yes, we do. We do have the evidence. She didn't say there was no evidence. She said we almost have no evidence. If now Mike has this book, we're going to see another click of his. And if you look in the back behind him, you will see this book. Well, you may not recognize, but I recognize it. And there's another book there. I'm thinking, dude, you have the books there where you can check it. In that book, and in the quote that he utilizes, where she says that we have almost no evidence for this, there's a little footnote number by the word this. Footnote number 29. You go to footnote number 29, where she says that it is difficult to make the case that it refers to leader in Greek, for we have almost no evidence for that. Little footnote number 29 on page 200. What is footnote number 29 says? Quote, Wayne Grudem, this is Dr. Kohik speaking. Wayne Grudem argued for the definition of leader. See Grudem, does kephale mean source or authority in Greek literature? A survey of 2,336 examples in the Trinity Journal. This is a 1985 article. Um, and also Grudem, the meaning of kephale, an evaluation of new evidence, real and alleged. She says, quote, he examined over 2,000 examples of the term kephale in the ancient world and concluded that 2.1% of the time it should be translated with the sense of leader or having authority over, including in the biblical text examples, including in the biblical text examples. Within the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible, known as the Septuagint, there are six instances out of 171 occurrences of kephale that might be understood as authority. Okay. Um, yeah, so let's see. Okay, she said Richard Cervin, a scholar we're going to talk about, notes that Judges 11:11 includes the gloss or the meaning they set him over them as head and as leader, using either hegemonon or archegon to clarify the Hebrew metaphor for the Greek readers. Now, what she's saying here is very simple, is that the evidence for kephale, meaning leader, is not that it's not existence, it's very small and very sparse. This is why she says it is difficult to make the case, and there is almost no evidence. There's a little bit of evidence that it can refer to leader. She said that when the Septuagint, and this is true, I've heard many other scholars say this, when the Septuagint translated the Hebrew words that mean leader, there are Hebrew words that mean leader. One of them is rosh. When it translates it into Greek, with the Greek Bible that Paul would have used, that Jesus would have used. They say when the Hebrew word for leader is translated into Greek, they use there's 170 times that the word leader shows up in Hebrew. Of those 171 times, of those 171 times, only 6 times do they use kephale to translate the Hebrew term for leader. Only 6. Okay, so that means there's over, what, 155, no, 165 times that it's not translated that way. Okay, so in other words, if kephale, and this is the argument that many scholars have made, if kephale was such a common term in Greek for leader, why is it that when they translated the Hebrew into Greek, they only used kephale 6 times and they used a bunch of other Greek words for the Hebrew word for leader? There are other Greek words for leader. They only use kephale only 6 times. Why is that if it was such a common word? And by the way, what scholars tend to say is not that kephale can never be used as leader, it's that it just wasn't common. It wasn't something that when people heard kephale, that it would have activated in their mind automatically in Greek, leader. It just wasn't a common usage. That is what Dr. Lynn Cohick means when she says, I have no evidence, and when she says, excuse me, that in Hebrew, Latin, and Greek, head can be used metaphorically to indicate leader. It is difficult to make that case that it refers to leader in Greek because we have almost no evidence. It is difficult. Why? Because there's such a small use of it. What we see is in the Septuagint, it's out of 171 times that the Hebrew word for leader is translated by Greek words, kephale is only used 6 times. Only 6 times. So the evidence is small. For Mike to say, she says there is no evidence. No, that's not what she said. And again, this is what I mean by misunderstanding, misrepresenting, mischaracterizing the work of egalitarian scholars. And in my opinion, there's no excuse for that because he has the book. He could have read that she acknowledges that it's only utilizes 6 times. She doesn't say it's never used what she said. And again, if he the way he got the quote from, all he had to do is look at the little footnote, look down to the bottom of the page, and right there he would have seen that she says there is evidence where it's used 6 times out of 171 times. Okay. So I'm not sure why he does that. So Mike gets her wrong. Let's look at another clip. I want to look at another clip real quick. And we're going to look at something else that he says where she is concerned. I think I know what happened the last time when my clips got messed up. Okay, so I'm going to play this for you. Let me get it set up for you here. There we go. All right, here we go.
I have no evidence that head means leader in Greek, and lexicons in the 19th and 20th century support source but not leader. So I have access to a bunch of lexicons, and I thought that sounds like a super strong claim, right? The point is that modern scholarly work shows that this word means source and does not carry the connotation of leader. Now, in spite of everything we've already done in the video, you're like, wait a minute, Mike, like, how is it? That doesn't make sense. And I agree with you. It doesn't make sense.
Okay, so the thing that he says here, turn this off here, is that there we go, is that, and this is something we've already covered. If you go back to my video number 91 of Who's the Boss, I've already covered this in detail, so I'm not going to go into the details again. But let me just quote to you what I said in video 91. Taryn Williams and Andrew Bartlett, who are authors of books that deal with the question of women in ministry and how God sees women. Matter of fact, there's one of the books, Taryn's books behind me is How God Sees Women. I have Andrew Bartlett, his book called Men and Women in Christ. Two great books, highly recommend them. They're two great authors and scholars. And Taryn Williams has a website that you can go to I believe it's .com or .org. I forget, but either one of those two. And they have critiqued all of Mike's videos. They've done written critiques. I'm doing a video critique. They've done written critiques. And I highly recommend them. This is what they said about Mike. They said, quote, the reason Mike finds Dr. Lynn Cohick's words problematic and doesn't understand why she says 19th and 20th century lexicons, as we just saw, what and the reason he doesn't understand why she says 19th and 20th century lexicons don't give leader as a definition is because he again misreads and misunderstands Dr. Cohick's work, which is what I've been saying. And they said, quote, Cohick's citation of lexicons here as secondary sources is concerned primarily with what they say about usage prior to Paul. Okay, now what do I mean by this? If you go back to video 91, Mike is concerned. He says, "Hey, what does she mean that 19th and 20th century lexicons don't have leader?" Yes, they do. And then he references 15 lexicons. We didn't play it, but you can go back and watch his video. He has 15 different lexicons that he looks at, and he shows at least I think it's like 12 of them, maybe 13 where he said, "See, these are 19th and 20th century lexicons, and they do show that leader." So Cohick is wrong. I don't know what she's talking about. And what I said there is, again, like Bartlett and Williams said, he misunderstands what she's talking about. What I said in video number 1, Dr. Cohick is referring to lexicons that are what I call non-New Testament lexicons of the 19th and 20th century. Okay. She's not referring to New Testament lexicon, except in one case, which she refers to a lexicon called BDAG, which I don't think I said that the last time, but I'm saying it here now. There's one case where she does talks about one New Testament lexicon called BDAG. It's an acronym for the guys who wrote the video. It was Bauer, Danker, Arndt, and Gingrich. BDAG, BDAG. They wrote a New Testament lexicon, and I have it. I meant to bring it and show it to you. I forgot. It's across the room. But she was not referring to New Testament lexicons, with the exception of DBAG. She was talking about non-New Testament lexicons. In other words, extra biblical lexicons that deal with the Greek language and how Greek was used prior to the time of Paul. These are the lexicons that she is referring to. Okay. And I base this on a couple of facts. Number one, Dr. Cohick in a footnote, again, footnote number 30 in this book. I just read to you 29. The next footnote is 30. And in that footnote, she talks about the Liddell Scott 1843 lexicon edition and their 1996 lexicon edition. These are 19th and 20th century non-New Testament lexicons. These are lexicons that are not dealing with primarily and exclusively with the Greek words in the New Testament. They're dealing with Greek words, period, within a certain time period of Greek history. Okay. So I call them non-New Testament lexicons because they're not focused on the New Testament. And often many of these lexicons will not be quoting New Testament scriptures. They're just dealing with the words as they appeared in the history of Greece. Okay. All right. So number one, she's not talking about New Testament lexicons that Mike was referring to. She's talking about non-New Testament lexicons. She says this in the book, note number 30. She then states additional ancient lexicons do not define Kephili as authority or leader. See Cervin. Does Kephili mean source? She's talking about Richard Cervin. Okay. So she says she is talking about ancient lexicons, not lexicons that are dealing specifically with the New Testament, but are dealing with the Greek prior to the time of Paul, so that they can. And the reason she's referenced these is she says, "Hey, when we look at how Kephili was used prior to the time of Paul, we do not see in these ancient lexicons Kephali being given the meaning of leader. It doesn't happen. And this is what she's talking about. Now, I know that based upon what she wrote, and I know that because I emailed Dr. Kohik and asked her, am I understanding you correctly? She emailed me back to confirm that I did understand her correctly. Okay. And she said that, look, even she said lexicons are not magic, even Christian lexicons are not magic. The proper methodology is when you're trying to understand how what a word means is you look at lexicons and you look at the use of a word prior to the use of a word being used in the New Testament. So often, what scholars will do, like Dr. Kohik, like Richard Cervin, is that they will go and look at what we call extra biblical lexicons or dictionaries. In other words, these are dictionaries or lexicons that deal with the Greek language and their usage prior to the time of Paul. Okay, so this is what they're doing. And that's good scholarship. Wayne Grudem actually does this in his article. And so when Mike goes, I don't understand, and he was I want to say complaining, but he was saying, well, she doesn't. She's saying that the 19th and 20th century New Testament lexicons don't have leader as a definition, but they do. She wasn't talking about New Testament lexicons. She was talking about extra biblical lexicons. So again, I covered this in detail. You can go back and watch it. All right, let me show you. So once again, he gets it wrong. And like I said, I have the email from Dr. Kohik. She wrote me back personally to say, and I'm friends with her on Facebook, but she was gracious enough because she's very busy. And she emailed me back a short note to say, yeah, you're understanding this correctly. Okay. So, and she often says, I don't understand what Mike Winger is, how he is misunderstanding what I'm saying. And I think it's because Mike did not, she didn't say that exactly, as I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that was the gist of it. Mike is not reading closely and carefully what these scholars are saying, and he misunderstands it, which causes him to misrepresent what they're saying. Then he thinks they're wrong, and actually he's getting them wrong. Okay, let's look at another clip. I'm going to show you another clip of Mike, and I'm trying to go through these quickly here. This is I think, did I skip over a quick clip here? I think I did. Well, I'm going to play this one and then make any comments that need to be made here. So let me play this one for you. Clip number 4, and we'll talk about it. Here we go. So he's talking about BDAG here. And again, this is what BDAG looks like. This is the Greek English lexicon of the New Testament and other early Christian literature. And let's listen to what he has to say about this.
That kephale, in the case of living beings, is used to denote superior rank. Superior rank. And then when you look at what they think that definition applies to, they specifically cite 1 Corinthians 11:3 and Ephesians 5:23, both about male headship in relation to their wives. So BDAG says it's about superior rank, specifically in the passages we're in today, and source is never given as a meaning in BDAG, and BDAG is considered the most respected New Testament lexicon there is. It does not mention the word leader, so she's right about that. It doesn't say leader, but it does say superior rank, right? So obviously it means the same thing. So we're just playing with words if we argue about that.
Okay, so what Mike here is talking about is he's starting to try to show that Dr. Kohik is wrong to say that 19th and 20th century lexicons do not have leader as a meaning of kephali, and he uses BDAG. Now, she quotes BDAG, and like Mike said, BDAG does not have listed as one of its definitions the word leader, which is what Dr. Kohik also said. I also know this is true. I pulled out my DBAG, and I looked it up, and sure enough, it does not say that one of the definitions for kephali, as in the husband is the head, the kephali of the wife, it does not give leader as one of the definitions. Okay, now the definition that is in the DBAG is it says superior rank, and Mike does give this as a definition. Mike gives the definition of superior rank, and he quotes the lexicon as referencing 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, and Ephesians chapter 5, I believe is verse 23, where it says, wives, submit yourselves unto your husbands as unto the Lord, for the husband is the head of the wife, even as Christ is the head of the church. Um, he acknowledges that leadership is not mentioned or given as a definition. He acknowledges that. But then, if he had stopped right there, he'd have been good. He messes up. He goes on to say, quote, this is what we just read. It doesn't mention leader, and he acknowledges that it doesn't mention it, but it does say superior rank. And it does say superior rank. And then he says this, and obviously it means the same thing, and we're just playing with words if we argue about that. He's saying that the definition that BDAG gives of superior rank means leader, that it means the same thing. No, it does not. It is not obvious that it means the same thing. And this again, this says to me that Mike didn't really do his homework, that just because it says superior rank does not automatically mean it, therefore, the term kephale means leader. Now, superior rank could mean leader. It is a possibility, but it can also mean or refer to a person who has a higher social status than another person. They have a higher social status than another person. It can refer to a person who is more prominent than another person, or a person who's more honored than other people or another person. But just because you're more prominent or you're more honored or you have higher social status does not mean you are a leader. Okay? Doesn't mean that you are a leader over the people that you have higher status over. Let me give it to you like this. Let's say we take the word someone who's more prominent. I would say that Denzel Washington is more prominent than me. More people know Denzel Washington than they know me. So Denzel Washington, in terms of superior rank, and rank here just talks about the level or status that you're on, doesn't necessarily mean you're a leader. So Denzel Washington is of a superior rank in terms of he has more prominence than me. Does that mean that Denzel Washington is my leader? It does not. It does not. Okay. Just because somebody has more, they're more prominent or more well known than another person. So I could give this illustration. In certain circles within the church, within Christianity, within different churches that I move in, I am more prominent than my daughter, would say my daughter Michaela, because Michaela is really quiet and she's much more of an introvert than, well, I'm an introvert too, surprisingly enough, but she's real quiet. So I am more prominent in certain circles than my daughter Michaela. Does that mean because I'm more prominent, therefore I am her leader? Now I'm her dad, yes, but my daughter's an adult now. Okay. But my point is because I'm more prominent in certain circles than she is, does that mean I am more that I'm her leader? Or if we take people, friends of mine, there are certain circles, there are certain, like I do training for corporations. So in certain training organizations, I'm more prominent than Aaron, whom you saw earlier. But does that mean that I am the leader over Aaron because I'm more prominent? No, because in Aaron's circles, he's more prominent than me. People know him, they never heard of me. Does that make him the leader of me? No. So you can be more prominent. You can have a superior status or rank. Doesn't mean you're a leader. So for when Mike says, yeah, it doesn't mention leader, but it does say superior rank, and obviously it means the same thing. That leader and superior rank means the same thing. It can refer to a leader. It does not necessarily refer to a leader. And for him to say, and we're just playing with words if we argue about that. No, you're not playing with words. You go look up superior rank. If you go look up rank, you will see that there are different levels of meaning, different types of meaning, I should say, different range of meanings. Okay. So you just can't say that. That is wrong. This is what Mike gets wrong. Okay. All right. So now the reason I bring this up is because if people who are listening to Mike don't fact check this or understand, and this is why this is important, the word can mean to be of superior rank or higher status. If you don't understand that in the first century world, status was very important. People were very status conscious. People were always seeking to be higher than others on the social status scale or the honor scale. And if you don't understand this, you will think Mike is right when he says, well, superior rank means leadership. No, you're dealing with a word that's being used within a first century context. And in the first century culture of the day, what people were striving to be superior in honor and in status than other people. So kephale can play into that. Can kephale mean leader? Yes, we've seen this that at least 7 times, 6 or 7 times in the Old Testament, it translates the word rosh, which means leader. However, it is not commonly, it doesn't do that. It's not a common usage of kephale. Does kephale, can it refer to people who are of superior rank, who are more prominent or preeminent? Yes, and we do see this. We do see it being used in this way. All right. So if you don't know that, if you don't understand the culture of the day, and you just hear Mike say, oh, it says superior rank. And he does this often too because he'll look at words like chief, it can mean chief. But chief, again, does not necessarily mean leader. It can mean the one who is more prominent, the one who is preeminent. It can carry these meanings also. So if you don't know this, if you don't understand first century culture, then you can think, well, look, Mike is correct. And these egalitarian scholars, they're just not they're just not being very scholarly. They're not being academic. They're not doing a good job. And what it is that Mike either lacks understanding of first century culture, or he didn't look up all the words, which means he didn't really do his homework well enough. And I don't mean this as a put down of Mike. I'm just saying that he really truly missed some things here that it was simple to look up. I looked them up. All right. All you have to do is look them up. Okay, so these are some things that he missed, but what he ends up doing is saying, see, these scholars are not doing a good job. You can't trust these scholars. And this is why I have a problem with how he is communicating this. It's not just simply, I disagree. It is also, I disagree, and I disagree because these scholars are just getting it wrong, and they're not telling you the truth, or they're using statistical trickery, or they're distorting the word of God. And that's not the case at all. Okay? All right, let's look at another clip. This is where he begins to critique another scholar by the name of Dr. Richard Cervin. Let me tell you who Dr. Richard Cervin is. Dr. Richard Cervin, he is a gentleman who received his master's and his PhD in linguistics, in language, with an emphasis on the classics. All right. This is a smart man. He has a PhD in linguistics. Now, does that mean he's always right? No, but it means that we need to pay attention to what he's saying. Okay. Because this is somebody who has a PhD in language, in linguistic, how language is supposed to be used. And he graduated from the University of Illinois. So Mike quotes in this clip that we're getting ready to see, he quotes Dr. Cervin, and he makes critiques about Dr. Cervin's use or lack of use of lexicon, his use and lack of use of lexicons. So let me pull this up for you again. Where did my cursor go? There we go. Going to pull this up, and we're going to listen to what he has to say about Dr. Cervin. Yeah, we got the right one there. Here we go. Here we go.
So Lynn Cohick's summary seems really problematic. Then how does she say, and I quote her again, ancient lexicons do not define kephale as authority or leader. Why does she say this when actually a lot do? And this comes back to the work of a guy named Richard Cervin. Leading.
Okay, so this is the introduction.
Lynn Cohick,
forgot I had the introduction. So that's the introduction. He talks about Richard Cervin and why Dr. Cohick has the perspective that she has. Now let's look at what he says about Dr. Cervin. Here it is. Here we go.
Here's some problems with this paper. He analyzes all these ancient lexicons, but he will not analyze any New Testament examples of kephale. So he's going to try to think, his paper's being used to weigh in on what Paul meant by kephale. He never even looks at Paul. He never reads or quotes or uses or analyzes New Testament uses. But that's the point of the paper in the end, is it's used to talk about the New Testament use. He rejects, in addition, all New Testament lexicons, most of the ones that I quoted to you. He rejects them all.
Okay, so let me say this real quick. This, what you see on here, does kephale mean source or authority over in Greek literature, a rebuttal? This is an article that Dr. Cervin wrote. in 1989. And at the time, he was uh, teaching at Urbana-Champaign, Illinois, the university there. That's also where he graduated from. He's now retired. And I'm going to do my best to see if I can get an interview with him. I would love to interview him about this. I'm going to work on that this week to see if I can get an interview. Mike, again, I want to play it for you again because I want you to listen to what he says and what his critique of Dr. Cervin is, and then we're going to talk about it.
Cervin refuses to analyze. Here's some problems with this paper. He analyzes all these ancient lexicons, but he refuses. He will not analyze any New Testament examples of kephale. So he's going to try to think. His paper's being used to weigh in on what Paul meant by kephale. He never even looks at Paul. He never reads or quotes or uses or analyzes New Testament uses. But that's the point of the paper in the end, is it's used to talk about the New Testament use. He rejects, in addition, all New Testament lexicons, most of the ones that I quoted to you. He rejects them all.
Okay, so to hear this again, you would think that Mike is saying, and it sounds like, man, the Cervin guy. If I was just listening to Mike and I didn't go do the research myself, I read that article, I have the article. I would think, oh, wow, Cervin didn't even look at the New Testament lexicon. He didn't even look at Paul. Oh man, this guy, that means this guy is not really well informed. You get that impression. Okay. So he makes the argument that Cervin does not make use or refer to New Testament passages to see how kephale is used by Paul. I will tell you that in Cervin's paper, where he's trying to show what does kephale mean, he does not in his paper use New Testament lexicon, New Testament dictionaries. Now, Mike has a problem with this, but again, his problem with it demonstrates, in my opinion, Mike's and Andrew Bartlett and Taryn Williams say the same thing in their article. He has a lack of understanding about how lexicons are used, and he misunderstands what Cervin is arguing in his paper, in his article. Actually, he has more than one article. Dr. Cervin does. Now, Mike says something interesting about New Testament lexicons. I want to play this real quick because I just thought, I went, well, that's interesting, a little bit confusing. Let me play for you, I should say, something that he says about New Testament lexicons. Let me bring this up. Let me see, did I have the right one? Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, that's the right one. Okay, let me bring this up here. This is what he has to say about New Testament lexicons that I found a little confusing.
Now, a New Testament lexicon is not a Christian lexicon. What it is it's a lexicon that focuses on Greek and its use in the New Testament. This is a specialty lexicon. This is like, say, if you get a lexicon, it focuses on how Plato or Philo used Greek. That means it's going to be actually better for when you understand Philo. You want someone who's like, how did Philo use kephale? That's what I want to know if I'm reading Philo. How does the New Testament use? But he refuses to use any of them, and he gives you reasons in his paper why. Let me summarize them.
Okay, we're going to look at the summaries in just a moment. But I found it interesting that Mike said New Testament lexicons are not Christian lexicons. When I was listening to it again this morning, I went, huh? Because here's the thing. The reason I find this confusing is, how are they not Christian lexicons if they, and he said, they focus on and specialize on terms in the New Testament and not Greek terms that you find in Philo, who's another Greek writer, or Herodotus, who's another Greek writer. Mike says, he argues, New Testament lexicons focus on words in the New Testament. Who was the New Testament written for? Christians. If you have a lexicon, a dictionary that is focused on words specifically dealing with New Testament words in Greek, and that's the focus, who are those lexicons for? Christians. Therefore, they are Christian lexicons. Not sure why he argues that they're not. They are. They're New Testament lexicons. They are geared towards Christians to help Christians to better understand the Greek words used in their, and I'm going to use this term, Christian scriptures. Okay, that's the purpose of them. All right, so now we're going to look at, because he says Dr. Cervin does not utilize these lexicons, and he has reasons why, and I'm going to summarize. Now, here's the thing I say. We are always on dangerous ground when Mike starts to summarize because he tends to summarize wrong or he makes it say something that they didn't say. So let's look at his summary of Dr. Cervin. Okay. So let me pull this up here. And I think this is actually our last video that we're going to utilize. Yep, this is the last video.
In his paper, Why? Let me summarize them. Maybe they're influenced by a patriarchal culture. Maybe they can't tell what Greek means here because he supposes they're just bad at their job. He accuses them of not reading extra biblical sources like Plato, Herodotus, or Plutarch. But they do. Like BDAG, Gold Standard refuses to use any of them, and he gives you reasons in his paper why.
Okay, so he gives the summary as to why Dr. Cervin is not utilizing and referring to New Testament lexicons when he is arguing about the meaning of Kephali. Okay. Now, Mike says that he doesn't do it because he's saying that of patriarchal culture, because maybe these scholars or theologians are not good at their jobs. They haven't read Philo or Herodotus. And he goes, well, in BDAC, they they do utilize that. And it's true they do. Let me read to you what Dr. Cervin said. So let me go to my notes here. I got to switch over. I made a copy of it. Okay, so Dr. Cervin said this. He said, number one, let's see. He talks about the value of D-bag. He says the value of bag, back then it just called bag, B-A-G, Bauer, Arndt, and Gingrich. The value of bag lies more in their citations of the literature and their bibliography rather than in the definitions per se. So he acknowledges, Dr. Cervin does, that the D-bag, which we call it today, does cite literature outside of the New Testament. So Mike's thing is of him thinking that, well, he's saying that they don't do it. No, he acknowledges it in the article that Mike has and said he read. All right. So he says the value of bag lies more in their citations of the literature and their bibliography rather than in the definitions per se. He says, I do not wish to undermine the value of bag, but it is deficient in certain respects. It does not treat the idiomatic expressions of prepositions while the LSJ does, which is another Greek lexicon. Insofar as theologians, notice this, insofar as theologians only use, and I'm going to use the current term, D-bag, they automatically restrict their understanding of the Greek language, which in turn seriously affects their exegesis. He said, is if they only use D-bag, is that all that the theologians who are interpreting the text, who are writing the commentaries, if that's all that they're doing is utilizing D-bag, they automatically restrict their understanding of the Greek language, which in turn seriously affects their exegesis. Okay. He goes on to say, just as numerous New Testament lexica has been produced over the years, so also are there lexica for very many individual Greek authors. And then he says, I've checked the following for any definition of authority, either of authority over or leader for Kephali. And then he goes on and he cites about 12 or 13 different Greek lexicons that are not New Testament lexicons. They are what I call non-New Testament lexicons. All right. And they are uh, uh, lexicons of individual Greek authors, and he's looking at the words that they use. And he says, I looked up where they used Kephali, and in these other Greek lexicons, the authors did not utilize a Kephale. They did not say Kephale means authority over or leader. These are other lexicons outside of the New Testament ones. He goes on to say, okay, apparently the only other lexica or lexicon to include such a definition that Kephale means leader are the New Testament lexicon, the New Testament lexicons. Why is this so? He goes, wait a minute. So when I look at all of these other lexicons that are outside of the New Testament, that are non-New Testament Greek dictionaries, none of them cite kephale as meaning leader or authority over. The only lexicons that do that, which means he's familiar with them, because Mike's like, well, he doesn't even include them. He's familiar with them. He says the only lexicons that do that are the New Testament lexicons. Only the New Testament lexicons will say kephale and then give as one of the meanings authority over and leader. But all of these other ones over here that are non-New Testament, they don't. Why is that? And then he goes on to say the soil of Greek lexicography has been amply tilled and plowed over the centuries, and if leader is a common understanding of kephale, notice he says if it is a common understanding, he doesn't say it doesn't mean that. He said if it is a common understanding, if leader is a common understanding of kephale as Grudem claims, Wayne Grudem, then why is it apparently never so listed in any Greek lexicon outside the purview of the New Testament? Now, let me say this. This is something that Mike, he complains about, but he doesn't answer. He doesn't really answer why these other Greek lexicons never give as a meaning of kephale, leader or authority over. He just complains that Cervin doesn't use the New Testament Greek lexicons. But Cervin is asking the question, if it's so common as Wayne Grudem is saying, because Wayne Grudem wrote an article about this and said it should be defined this way, and it is common. He said, if it is so common, how come none of these other Greek lexicons have that? That's a good question. Okay. And again, he's not just talking about one lexicon. He's talking about at least 12 or 13 that he's quoted. Okay. Um, so let me go on from here. He says, if it's so common as Wayne claims, then why is it apparently never so listed in any Greek lexicon outside the purview of the New Testament? In other words, how come the only ones who quote is New Testament lexicons, but not these others? He goes on to say, I offer several possible reasons, not least of which is tradition and a male dominant worldview. The expertise of theologians is the New Testament, not classical or even Hellenistic Greek per se. Now, keep in mind, his expertise is classical languages. He's a linguist in the classical languages. He's a linguist expert in classical Greek. All right. So the expertise of theologians is the New Testament, not classical or even Hellenistic Greek per se. Per se. He says it's not really their expertise. While it may be true that some theologians have had a grounding in classical Greek, especially those of the 19th century, they spend their time pondering the New Testament, not Plato, Herodotus, or Plutarch. Now, this is what Mike argues against. He says, well, he's saying that, we shouldn't consult them because they're not reading um, Plato, Herodotus, or Plutarch. There's a reason why, though. He said, and it must never be forgotten that it was uh, philologists, philologists like Moulton and Deisman who exploded the myth that the language of the New Testament, which is Koine Greek, was a special or unique language rather than the colloquial Koine. Another reason why he says that um, that Kephale, that the New Testament, um, those who compile the New Testament lexicons, the reason they have leader as a meaning of kephale, another reason stems from Latin, a very unlikely source. What does he say? In the West, Latin has always been more popular than Greek. And until the last century, Latin was the lingua franca of the scholarly world. This was the language that scholars worked in, Latin. Now, the Latin word for head. Now, keep in mind, the scholars had been working in Latin. Probably next week, I'm going to bring a little bit more on this. There's another scholar that I read who also talks about this, who I also wrote to and asked him about. He says, now the Latin word for head, caput, C-A-P-U-T, caput, I believe that's how you pronounce it, does have the metaphorical meaning of leader. Now, keep in mind, follow me. He says, up until, let me go back and find it. Up until where is it? I lost it. He says, in the West, Latin has always been more popular than Greek, and until the last century, Latin was the lingua franca of the scholarly world. Latin was the language that scholars used when they were doing their research. In Latin, the word for head is caput. Caput, the Latin word, can and does have the metaphorical meaning of leader, and he cites the Oxford Latin Dictionary. Thus, for English speaking theologians, at least, for English speaking theologians, English, Hebrew, and Latin all share leader as a common metaphor for head, a metaphor which is nonetheless alien to ancient Greek. How does he know it's alien to ancient Greek? Because, as he said earlier, he went and checked and referenced 12 to 13 ancient Greek lexicons, and none of them had kephale as, as meaning leader. So he says, yes, while in English, theologians working um, with English, Hebrew, and Latin, yes, those all share leader as meaning, kephale as meaning leader, or head as meaning leader. It's a common metaphor in English, Hebrew, and Latin, but it's alien to ancient Greek. Thus, the force of tradition. What's the tradition? Hey, we've been working in Latin, and in Latin, the word for head is kaput, and kaput can mean metaphorically a leader. We've been working with Hebrew, and in Hebrew, the Hebrew term is rosh. Rosh can metaphorically mean leader because rosh means head. In English, our English, we could say he's the head of the company. Yes, he's the leader of the company. He says, so that's the tradition, this is what people have been used to. He then goes on to say also a male dominant culture. Now, in our culture, what he's talking about is that theologians, he offers this as a possibility. He doesn't say it's 100% fact, but I think he's making some correct assumptions that many theologians were influenced by a male dominant culture, and this determined how they were interpreting the text. Now, somebody might go, oh, no, Mike, that's not true. Do a study of how during the civil rights, not civil rights, during the Civil War, during the what was known the antebellum period, when abolitionists began to arise and to speak against slavery, pastors and theologians, people with doctors of divinities, people with PhDs in the South, argued for slavery on the basis of it's always been. This is the plain reading of the text, and many of them were slave owners themselves. Don't say, oh, people are not influenced by culture. Theologians can be influenced by culture. Okay. His argument has some weight. He's not saying it's 100% true and accurate. He said this is some possibilities that theologians can be influenced by culture, and their and cultural influence enters into how they interpret the text and the entries that they make into the lexicons. So if you have a male dominated culture where you believe, as in our culture and in cultures around the world, it was believed for many years that men are superior. Let me give you another one. Do you know what one of the exegesis was in First Timothy chapter 2 when it says, for the woman was deceived, but the man was not deceived? It was taught for many years. Women are um, more susceptible to deception than men are. This is one of the reasons women cannot teach. This was taught in the church up until about the 1950s and 60s. That women have more of more proclivities to be deceived, and there are some people today who still say women are more relational, and so if false doctrine are coming into the church, women will be more relational and not stand up and take a stand where men will. This harkens back, in my opinion, to the old teaching that was taught for centuries, and it was part of the Greco Roman teaching. Women are not as rational as men, women are not as intellectual as men. And this entered the church. You had some of the early church fathers who thought the same thing and thought the same way. Don't tell me that culture cannot influence theology. And it's so funny because there are many complementarians today that said this teaching that women can be on have equal status and leadership with men, they're just being influenced by the culture. And they're saying that like they have not been influenced by the culture. It was only about, I think, in the 1960s that they actually changed that thinking that, or I should say, they stopped saying women are more susceptible to deception than men, that women don't have the intellectual capacity as men do, therefore women can't be leaders. They stopped saying that. Why? Because the culture around us was changing. The culture around us. All of a sudden, you had the women's rights movement, you had the feminist movement, and it just wasn't a good thing to say anymore. Now, somebody would say, "Oh, no, 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 no. It wasn't because of that." They did not change this simply because of Scripture. It's the same way with in the South when they begin to change their views about slavery. They did not change their views about slavery because, and this is documented by a historian named Mark Knowles, who writes on the theological, what is the book called? Uh the the theological, it's the theological something of the Civil War, the theological conflict of the Civil War, I think it's called, by Dr. Mark Knoll. One of the things he writes in the book is, for during the Civil War, those in the South who believed in slavery, believed it was support, that the Bible supported slavery, they pushed against it, and they were expecting God to vindicate them and give them the victory. When they lost, it caused cognitive dissonance. They're like, wait a minute, we lost? How did we lose? If we're in the right, how did we lose? And they began to change their views because they lost, not because they went back to the scriptures and said, maybe we got this wrong. We repent. I have never seen now, and by the way, for years after that, in the Southern Baptist Convention, I'm not trying to put the Southern Baptists down. This is just fact. Southern Baptist was started because of racism, because they wanted to maintain slavery. And the Northern Baptists were saying, we will not accept any missionary who owns slaves. So they split because they wanted to maintain slavery. Well, even after slavery was over, when they started their school, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, Black people were not allowed to attend that seminary until into the 1940s. And even after in the 1940s, when they were starting to attend, Black people had to function and they had to sit in another building. They could not mix with the white students until the 1950s. Don't tell me that culture does not impact your interpretation of the text, even complementarians. Yes, it does. Yeah, and Southern Baptists are complementarians. Okay. Now, I'm saying all of that to simply to make the point: culture can influence your interpretation of the text. Now, I'm not saying that everything they say has been interpreted, but it can happen. And this is what Dr. Cervin is saying. It was a male dominated culture. You had these theologians in a male dominated culture. Theologians are making decisions and interpretive decisions, not understanding or and not fully grasping that they're being influenced by their culture. And so they will interpret Kephali as leader. Therefore, when you read Ephesians chapter 5, you will read it as leader, and men are supposed to be over women because it's a male dominated culture. This is why Dr. Cervin said possibly this is why some of our lexicons, the New Testament lexicons, are that they utilize that they define Kephali as leader, tradition, and a male-dominated culture. Okay, and he offers it as a possibility. He doesn't say 100% it's sure. He said it's a possibility, and he does not say they're not doing a good job. He does not say they can't read Greek. What he says is if you're only using New Testament lexicon and you're not reading outside of that, you're restricting your understanding of Greek. This is why I said when Mike begins to summarize, we're on dangerous ground because he doesn't summarize it correctly. He doesn't really bring out the point that's being made. Okay, let me go back to my notes. So I wanted to say that. Hope that made sense to everyone. Let's finish up here because I've already been going over. I want to finish. Okay. So what the reason Dr. Cervin does not utilize New Testament lexicon in his paper, because he says again, if New Testament theologians only use New Testament lexicons, they automatically restrict their understanding of the Greek language, which influences their exegesis. What Dr. Cervin is concerned with is methodology. He is looking at what is the proper, he's endeavoring to look at and to utilize the proper methodology when you're looking at words. And the proper methodology is to survey literature outside of the New Testament, outside of New Testament lexicons, in order to get a broader semantic range. Now, what do we mean by a broader semantic range? You get a broader range of meanings of the word. He says you've got to go outside the New Testament lexicon, look at these other Greek lexicons, because they will begin to give you a broader range of meanings. You won't be just restricted to what is said in the New Testament. That is his concern. And so he is talking about proper methodology. This is the proper way that you study words and language. You just don't look at one area. You look at a range of areas, or you look at a range of literature, so you can get larger meaning of what a word is saying. Okay. So he's saying if you only use New Testament lexicons, you will be restricted by the theological interpretation of New Testament uh, lex, lexic, 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 lex. I've been practicing this word now. I forget it. You will be. Let me say it again. If you're using only New Testament lexicons, you will be restricted by the theological interpretation of those New Testament scholars who put the lexicons together. I'll say it like that rather than try to pronounce this word. Lexicographers, or lexic. I know the word. For some reason, I can't say it right now. Okay, so those who compile the lexicons, that's what he's talking about, those scholars. He said, if you only restrict yourself to the New Testament lexicons that were put together by these scholars, um, you're going to be restricted as it applies to your interpretation of Paul. If you only use the lexicons put together by New Testament scholars who put together the New Testament lexicons, you're going to be restricted in your understanding of the Greek as it applies to Paul. And here's the thing. Here's the thing. You cannot use how the people who put the lexicons together, you cannot use their interpretation of Paul's usage of kephale to determine how Paul used kephale. Let me say that again. You cannot take those who wrote the New Testament lexicons and they said, this is what Paul meant by kephale. You can't take their interpretation of Paul's usage of kephale to determine how Paul used kephale. You say, well, Mike, what do you mean? Because if you're using their interpretation of Paul to determine how Paul used kephale, you end up in circular reasoning. Let me give you an illustration of this. Okay. Let's say we find a book called, and this is where I'm going to end, the Book of Mike. Okay. It's a sacred book, the Book of Mike. And in the Book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1, it says, hand me the Macintosh. Lo, hand me the Macintosh. What does this mean? What does Macintosh mean? How is Macintosh used in chapter 1 and verse 1 of the Book of Mike? Well, you say, hey, let's check a lexicon. There is a lexicon specifically for the Book of Mike. It's called the DLR. It is the Davis Lynam Richard lexicon. These are people in our fellowship, okay? The Davis, Lynam, and Richard lexicon. We call it for short the DLR. And it's a lexicon written specifically for the Book of Mike. So we go to the DLR and we look up Macintosh and we say that it says it means computer. And then it has a little reference that says, see the Book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1. It means computer. Look at the Book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1. Okay. And they say it also refers to a certain type of apple. It refers to a certain type of apple, a Macintosh apple, but it also means computer. See the Book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1. So we would say, okay, so hand me the Macintosh means hand me my computer. But I could say to you, well, how do we know that? You go, well, what do you mean? Well, because when you look in the lexicon for the Book of Mike, and when you look at the DLR, the lexicon for the Book of Mike, you see it has an entry that it can mean computer. You go, yeah, right. That's what I just said. And it says, see Book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1. Well, you're applying the meaning of computer to the book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1. But how do you know it's not referring to a piece of fruit or an apple? All the verse says is, hand me the Macintosh. The lexicon simply says it is a computer. See book of Mike 1-1, and it also can mean an apple, but it's referencing computer and attaching the definition of computer to the book of Mike, chapter 1 and verse 1. So how do we know it's referring to the computer and not to an apple? How do we know he's saying, hand me the computer? How do we know he's not really saying, hand me the apple? And then you say, well, because the lexicon tells us what it means. The lexicon says Macintosh refers to a computer. See the book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1. That's how we know. The book of Mike uses Macintosh in the sense of computer. And we know this is true because the DLR tells us it uses it in the sense of computer because it says, see the book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1. This is circular reasoning, though. I'm saying the book of Mike says, lo, hand me the Macintosh. I go to the DLR lexicon and it says Macintosh can mean computer or it can mean an apple, but it means computer. See the book of Mike 1, verse 1. But all the book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1 says is, hand me the Macintosh. We have no idea. Is it referring to the meaning of computer or to the meaning of Macintosh? Or the meaning of an apple. If you say, but the lexicon says, and it refers to a computer, so see chapter 1, you're arguing in a circle. You can't use and you can't take how it is used in the book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1, and utilize that to define how it is used in chapter 1, verse 1. That's like using a word to define a word, which is something my teacher, my seventh grade teacher, Mrs. Brown, taught me years ago. She asked me the definition of a word, and I started to give her the definition, and I was using the word. She goes, never use a word to define a word. Because we were talking about something. She goes, do you know what that word means? I said, yeah. And I started to explain it, but I was using the word to define it. You can't use a word to define a word. You can't take the book of Mike, chapter 1, where it says, hand me the Macintosh, and then go to the lexicon. The lexicon says it can mean apple or it can mean a computer. See the book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1. I go to the book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1, and all it says is, hand me the Macintosh. But you say, well, that's referring to the computer. Well, how do you know it refers to the computer? Because the lexicon says it refers to a computer. Yeah, but the text doesn't say it's a computer or not. I'm just arguing in a circle. You can't do that. Okay. So we could ask, how did you check out? I could ask the question. And by the way, this is what's happening. So if you've got lexicons that say kephale means leader, see 1 Corinthians chapter 11 and verse 3, or Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 23, you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3. What does it says? Man is the head of woman. Okay, kephale is translated as head, but what does head mean? Well, you go, well, the lexicon says it means leader. And it says, see 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, and Ephesians chapter 5. But when I go to Ephesians chapter 5, verse 23, and 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 3, all I see is the word head. How do I know that it means leader? Well, because the lexicon said, you're arguing in a circle. You can't do that. You've got to have more evidence. So I could say to you, we're trying to figure out, what does Macintosh mean in the book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1? So I might say to you, hey, did you check out the lexicons by K and P? Well, you say, who's K and P? Oh, that's Karen and Paula. Karen and Paula put together a lexicon, and then there's also a lexicon by Bartlett and Williams, Andrew Bartlett and Taryn Williams. They cite and reference extra literature about the meaning of Macintosh, and their lexicons were written before the DLR, before the Davis, Lynham, and Richard lexicons. Have you checked out KNP? Have you checked out Bartlett and Williams? You go, well, no, I haven't checked them out yet. Yeah, I say you should check them out because they cite the book of, you asked the question, well, okay, KNP and Bartlett and Williams, do they refer to the book of Mike and its use of Macintosh? And I go, no, because all the lexicons on the book of Mike say computer. So what they did was KMP's lexicon and Bartlett and Williams lexicon, they show at least 3 meanings, not just 2. And they're looking at material outside of they're looking at material outside of these lexicons. They're looking at a lot of other works. They're looking at a book written by Sharon. They're looking at a book written by Lorna. They're looking at a book by Katerina and by Christina. Now, these are all people in our church. Okay. So they surveyed all this literature and they came up with at least three definitions, not just two. Say, really, what are those three? Okay, they said that Macintosh can mean an apple. Okay, well, that's what the lexicon for the Book of Mike says, the DLR. It can mean computer. Oh, yeah, that's what the DLR said. But here's one that the DLR didn't have. They said the word can also, they use the word and they talk about how there's a word from England, okay, from England, where Macintosh refers to a long coat that is weatherproof. So they got three definitions: a computer, a piece of fruit, an apple, and they use a word from England. And that word England, Macintosh, refers to a long coat that is weatherproof or a raincoat. Oh, okay. But they don't cite any references from the Book of Mike. No, because the Book of Mike just says Macintosh. We don't know what Macintosh means. We can't use the Book of Mike to determine what Macintosh means. We have to look at how is Macintosh being used. Then we go to the Book of Mike to see how the Book of Mike is using it. So what ends up happening is we go to back to the Book of Mike and we look at verse 1 and verse 2. Verse 1 says, "Lo, hand me the Macintosh." And verse 2 says, "Because behold, it rains." Oh, okay. Verse 2 says it. Hand me the Macintosh, for behold, it rains. Got it. This suggests that the meaning raincoat, when we start looking at the contextual clues, when we look at the literary context, this suggests that it is the Macintosh is referring to a raincoat. Now you might go, yeah, but the lexicon for the Book of Mike, the DLR, it doesn't use raincoat. It doesn't have it. Well, if you only use the DLR, which only deals with the Book of Mike and only has two meanings for Macintosh, you're going to be limited in your understanding because you're not looking at the full range of meaning. This is what Dr. Cervin was arguing. You've got to look at a full range. If you only use New Testament, you're going to get limited understanding. It's going to influence how you interpret the text. But if you get more full range, you get more literature that explores more meanings, like you've got the Book of Karen, you've got the book, the lexicon, the DLR for the Book of Mike, but also you have the K and P, and also you have the A and W, okay, which surveys different literature outside of the Book of Mike. And then we see that, wow, okay, we see in all this other literature, constantly they're talking about Macintosh and rain, Macintosh and raincoat. Macintosh helps you feel warmer in the rain. Okay, so Macintosh can mean apple, Macintosh can mean a computer, but it can also use a raincoat. So when we read the Book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1, and it says, "Lo, hand me the Macintosh, for behold, it rains," all of the evidence suggests, based upon a wider semantic range, that Macintosh in the Book of Mike, chapter 1, verse 1, is talking about a raincoat. This is the type of argument that Dr. Cervin is utilizing. You've got to use material, lexicons that are outside of the range of the New Testament lexicons. He's not saying New Testament lexicons are bad. He's saying they've got some problems, they have some limitations. So you need to step out beyond them so you're not limited to their limited meaning, which will limit your exegesis. Okay. And so this is what Mike doesn't get and understand, and he's not able to, in my opinion, articulate. What are our lexicons used for? And we'll talk about this more a little bit more next week. I have a little bit more to finish on this. You use lexicons to, the purpose of a lexicon is really not to define simply the meaning of a word. That's not the purpose of a lexicon. The purpose of a lexicon is to give you a wide range of meaning. If you look at a dictionary, most dictionary, you look up a word, it has a wide range of meaning. It's not giving you the meaning of a word, it's giving you the wide range of meaning. In order for you to determine what a word means. You look at the wide range, and then you look at the different contexts that the word is being used in. You look at the literary context. You look at the cultural context. You look at the context of the book in which the word is written to determine which of these meanings, let's say you've got three different meanings, which of these meanings fit the word in this context. That is how you do good study. That is a good methodology. Okay. You look at a wide range of meaning, then you take the word and go, okay, you have all these different meanings. When I say, lo, hand me the Macintosh, for behold, it rains, does it matter that it can also mean Apple? Does it matter that it can also mean computer? Not in the context of which is what it's being used, because in the context, I'm talking about a Macintosh that's a raincoat that'll protect me from the rain. So even though we have all these other meanings, it doesn't matter. It is, how is it being used in this context? And that is something that Mike misses in his critique of Dr. Cervin and in his critique of Dr. Kohik. It is what he gets wrong. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. Went a little bit over. I hope this was understandable. I hope I was able to break this down enough and that it made sense. The reason, again, this is important is because if you don't understand this and you're just watching Mike Winger and you walk away, you'll think that, man, these egalitarian scholars are just wrong, which is what he says. And that is poisoning the well, and it will keep people from going and exploring their works. And I want to offer a counter to that. Listen, if you like this, if you enjoyed this, if you learned from this, please share this video with other people. This will be uploaded to our YouTube channel within the next 48 hours. So if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, send this out. The more you like it, the more you send it out and share it with other people. It helps to grow our algorithm, and it helps us to get this message to more people. All right. Thank you so much for being with us today. Lord willing, we will be back next week. We're going to talk some more. You, Aaron, will be here, Lord willing, talking some more about looking at the ancient scriptures of the Old Testament in its ancient Near Eastern culture. And I'll be back talking some more about who's the boss, women and men in biblical and cultural context. Thank you. See you next week. Bye-bye.